Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu Podcast, episode number 34. In this episode, we are talking about how to beat any opponent's jiu-jitsu game.
Any and every.
All.
Yep. This is your one-stop shop for becoming a world champion.
Let's get straight into it. Go on,
no, before, all right. So John Danaher is joining us today to give us all the tips and tricks in a short 8-hour episode.
Yeah, with John Danaher's dulcet tones. But if you didn't listen to the previous episode, definitely go back and check it out. It's probably one of my, I say this all the time, but it's one of my favorites we've done so far, episode number 33. And that episode was about how to get promoted or why you're not being promoted. Yeah, so from white to blue all the way up to black belt. And from Adam's perspective, what he looks out for, his requirements, his standards and things. I mean, I took a lot away from it, obviously, because Adam's my coach, but I think there's a lot of information out there and a lot of really solid advice out there for anyone who is serious about being promoted.
Yeah. And on promotion, we've got I mean, I don't want to use the word grading.
You're going to have to.
Yeah, I'm going to have to.
It's a one-off grading.
Yeah, because I don't.
Special event.
Yeah, a special event. Yeah, let's call it that, because I don't really do grading events at the gym. And that's because I grade students individually.
Yeah.
So to hold if most gyms have 1 or 2 gradings a year. So then if I grade students individually, what if someone's ready to grade and, then they've got to wait 6 months and then they miss that grading event because they have to work or something, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they're a doctor, so it's not as simple as changing a shift, right?
Exactly.
And then they got to wait another 6 months. No, right? I do it individually. Sometimes it turns into a grading event because you might have it just syncs up where you've got quite a few people about to change belts at a similar time. But for us as well, it's also our end of year get together. It's also a get together just to see everyone post lockdown and thank everyone for the support they provided for the team during lockdown. So we do have a quote grading coming up. Who do you think is potentially changing the color of belts, Kieren?
Off air, I said that there is one person at the gym that, I mean, I'm sure there's more, and I don't know because this will come out before the grading. I don't know who's getting what or whatever, but there is one individual that I think is in my very humble white belt newbie shit kicker opinion that they're ready in my opinion. Like I see them as a high belt already in that view. Right?
Have you taken into consideration everything I mentioned in the last episode?
I have, and that's sort of it. Yeah, I'm still like not sure. I'm a bit like up in the air about it based on everything that you've said. I think maybe I'm wrong, but hey, fuck it. I'm going to go out on air and on record and say I think that there's a blue belt at our gym, Terrence. I think that I reckon he's ready for a purple belt, in my opinion. And that's a shout out to Terrence. I think that particularly based on the depth of knowledge he has, not only like, and this is a little bit of a fanboy rant now, not only like the depth of knowledge that he has, but whenever you're teaching a technique, we drill that technique and then he's able to then teach me a quick follow-up technique to that, or like to add value to it, to add on top of it, because he understands the concept and he's able to add more. And as you're saying about the in-depth knowledge that you expect from, blue belt to purple belt, I think he ticks those boxes. That's it.
I wasn't expecting you to say Terrence. I thought you would have had because we've got a lot of 4-stripe white belts at the gym.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't going to touch white belts.
All right. Yeah,
I was just thinking.
They're gross.
Ew, you white belts. No, I wasn't even going to go anywhere near white belt. There is some white belts that I'm, have in the back of my mind that definitely could see them being blue belts for sure.
Like, if you had to pick from, you've been at the gym a while and obviously you're a 4-stripe white belt. So you can, again, like we said in the last episode, you want to compete and everything, so you fall into a more a higher standard category, right? So it's a little bit different. But just using yourself as a reference point and other people that there's white belts in the gym who have been training longer than you or whatever. Yep. Is there anyone that in particular that you think, man, they should probably have a blue belt?
Depends on like how you're categorizing them.
Why explain that last step? Oh, you mean as in which? Okay,
Individually,
yeah.
individually,
because that's conversations
I don't really know they're, if they're, taking competition seriously, or if they're like if I don't know if someone you're categorizing in the competition lane, or if you're categorizing them in the hobbyist. That's the word I was looking for. So yeah, in terms of white belts, I'd say in hobbyists, if I'm categorizing all of them as hobbyists, I'd say Toby is pretty advanced for a white belt. And I mean, Samir's very good. Samir's a brown belt in judo, but I think he would be competitive, so maybe not. But yeah, like as a hobbyist, definitely like blue belt, for sure. Yeah,
a bunch of others. So many 4-stripe white belts, it's hard to remember. And I mean,
no, I don't categorize any of the others being ready.
And it's
like genuinely, like no offense.
Shit.
I'm like, well, maybe they are. Maybe I'm not seeing it, or like whatever.
It's going to be awkward when people come into the gym and everyone's like, Kieren, you and me.
Yeah, fuck
next
it. Bring
roll.
it. Bring it. Like, I'm not scared of any of the 4-stripe white belts.
It's also hard to gauge because
I'll be careful what I say on this shit.
Yeah, it's also hard to gauge, right? Because for us over the last 18 months going in and out of lockdown, like some people will feel like, man, I've been a white belt for like 2 years. And it's like, yeah, but for 9 months of those, you didn't train.
Yeah.
Not because you didn't want to, but because the gym was closed.
Well, I had a look at, after editing and putting some clips together on episode 27, I think it was, where we broke down like, I was basically saying how I like came up with a formula, or like telling people to come up with formulas to determine when they're getting their stripes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I went back last night and had a look at how many classes that I've attended since grading and since beginning. Can you guess how many classes you think I've been since graded?
Since your 4th stripe.
Since my 4th stripe.
Well, I mean, it's worth noting as well that I remember when you first said this to me ages ago, you were like, oh, I've done X amount of classes total. And then I went into the system. I was like, no, that's how many classes you've booked.
Yeah, so
that's not how many classes you've done. Because we've got a booking, because of COVID requirements, the gym doesn't operate just as a come and go, right?
Yeah.
We've got a online booking system.
And in my defense, I missed a shitload of classes because of work previously.
Yeah.
I've only missed one class that I booked in and didn't.
Yeah, and I called you out too. It was last Friday.
No, Saturday. It was Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah, I was like, a lot of people booked in who didn't show up, and you were like, put your hand up.
The emoji. Yeah. Didn't fucking come.
So how many since your 4th stripe? God,
Yeah.
Well, you got your 4th stripe before lockdown.
Oh, well before.
Before lockdown.
Hey, it was in March.
Was it?
Yeah.
Shit, and lockdown was
July?
June or July?
June.
Dude, I don't know, 100?
Yeah, pretty much bang on.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like 96.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shit.
Yeah.
Dude, only another 100 to go.
So I've done like 230, 40 or so odd, and then 96-ish of those have been since.
Look at you go, bro.
Since promotion. I'm fucking proud of that. I said to you that by the end of this year, I wanted over 365 attended classes on your software. That was my goal.
So what are you at total now?
Like 240-ish. I don't think I'm going to make it because of lockdown. I only have 1 month.
You missed 3 months. If you had been doing, you essentially do
and almost, I was off work as well,
like 8 to 10 classes a week, right?
Yeah, about 10 average. Or let's say average 8. Average.
But like
9,
I said in
whatever.
that other episode, right, a while back, I said that the students who do the doubles, like who train 5:30 class and then 6:30 class,
such a rort.
On the system, it counts as 2 classes, but I see that as one training session.
I've been thinking a lot about
that. Fuck off.
I want to push back. The reason is because if that's the case, and if I wanted to game the system, I would show up to the lunch class and then just do the 6:30.
Do it. Why not?
Because I don't think the training would be not as good, because that's not necessarily true, but I think it would be equal. I see them as equal.
But you get time to recover between those classes. You don't think then you could put more into the 6:30 because you've had 5.5 hours by the time the end of the class. You've got to rest, you've got to eat, you've got to hydrate.
Fuck, you're making good points. I'm like, for those that aren't seeing the video version of this, I'm like pondering out this. It's like, hang on, do I need to reformulate my fucking training plan for this? That's actually a good idea. Maybe I should try that.
Well, I don't know, like the example I gave last time was like lifting, right? There's a difference between you doing an hour workout at 12 and then another hour and a half at 6:30, or just doing one workout that went from 5:30 to 8 o'clock at
Because
night?
I must say that the doubles, like particularly now when I'm like the volume I'm doing is insane at the moment. Like in my
Does the
perspective,
double
insane.
not feel like one long workout?
No, it feels like two. It feels tough. Like depends on how I treat the first one. At the moment, I've been fucking going hard. I've been ramping my shit up. I've been training hard. I've been rolling hard. Unless it's with like someone that's like, oh, that's their day one, and I'm like, letting them work and whatever. Normally, regardless of who it is, I'm putting the smash on at the moment, or trying to. So yeah, it's tough. And at the end of it, I'm fucking shagged. That's why I've been bringing electrolytes. I've been having protein between. I've been doing all these other tactics.
You're bankrolling the boat I'm about to buy, the amount of Gatorade you're drinking from the gym. Yeah, but if you're doing...
But you're making a good point.
If you're doing, let's say, the 12 o'clock class and then the 6:30, right, opposed to doing the 5:30, then the 6:30, the last roll of the night, right, let's say you do the 5:30 and the 6:30, and the last roll of the night, that roll that happens at whatever, 7:45 at night or something, would that equal, if you've done the 5:30 to 6:30, sorry, if you've done the class, the 5:30 and the 6:30,
yeah,
will your last roll of the night be like, will your output be as good as it would be if you did the 12 o'clock, then had time to rest and recover, and then came back and did the 6? Of course not, right? Because you've done an extra hour, like instantly in front, like you've done the one long workout.
You're teaching the lunch today?
Yeah.
Fuck it. We're on.
Go.
All right. But look at this, like 10 minutes of me like planning out my fucking training schedule.
Right. So
sometimes I forget we're recording.
Yeah. So when I trained in Brazil, I would train I've said this so many times, I don't need to go into my schedule, but I would train at 7 in the morning, and then our competition class was at lunch class.
You do an hour of drilling as well.
And I do drilling and other training, but essentially I would have a few hours between those two sessions to rest.
And you found that it was
to rest and recover.
Did you have the double in the evening? Was that on your schedule?
There was like 3 classes back to back in the evening, but I wouldn't do them. So then when my work changed and I stopped training in the morning class, I would do the competition class at lunch, and then I would go back for there were multiple classes in the evening, but I would just do the one, in this case, our 6:30, which there started at 8 o'clock at night, right? I would do the competition class at lunch, and then I would go home or go to work, and just, even if I was at work, right, at least I'm not doing jiu-jitsu. So to some degree I'm recovering, and then I would go back and do the 8 o'clock class.
Right.
The only time I wouldn't do it like that is if work got in the way and I couldn't train in the morning and I couldn't train at lunch, then I would do the evening and
make up for it.
Yeah, and do 2 classes back to back. Right. But it was only, I had my work structured in a way that if I ever went for a job interview, I said I can't work in the middle of the day, because like competition training was my focus.
Yeah,
right?
that makes
sense.
sense.
So I trained at lunchtime every day, right?
Right. So do you teach the same technique at lunch that you do at the 5:30 or similar? Most days?
Not necessarily. Well, today, no, because the lunch class is no gi. Oh, well, the 5:30 is no gi as well today.
Yeah.
But all these people listening are like,
shut
I
the
don't
fuck up.
fucking care.
Yeah, get on to the fucking, how do I beat my opponent? Like,
yes,
what the hell?
Well, yes and no. But last episode you said that you need to see me teach a technique a few times before. So
absolutely.
Even if it is the same technique,
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, bro.
Look, I'm thinking I might change my schedule.
Look at you go, man. Look at you go.
All right, I'll trial it today, because I'm feeling wrecked today. I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking about phoning it in. Obviously, I'm not going to. You know that
can't
little
now.
No, fuck no. You know that little like inner bitch voice that's like, oh, just don't train today.
Yeah,
yeah. That was chirping away this morning when I like fucking decrepitly stumbled out of bed and fucking try to unroll my body.
Yeah, and I think you can also treat it like this: like if you're training at lunch, right, which isn't a competition class. You could go like, okay, cool, it's a 1 hour class. There's not as many rolls. I can take it a bit lighter and I can focus on this and that, almost treat it more of like a theory class, if you will. And then you get time to recover, and then you go to the 6:30.
Smash.
You haven't been working out since 5:30 this time, because you didn't do the 5:30 class. And then you just rock up to the 6:30 and you're fucking ready to go, bro.
I'm going to trial that today and probably tomorrow. I'm going to trial it the rest of the week. How about that?
Sounds good.
Anyway,
bro.
how the fuck do I beat someone's game?
So you do the 12 o'clock class and then, all right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some more concepts. The word concepts gets thrown around all the time in jiu-jitsu, like core concepts this and principles that, blah, 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 and whatever. But I need to find a better word. But for the moment, we'll stick with concepts. I think if you look at the current best performing competitors, right, a lot of them are very young, right? And of course, what allows them to compete at such a high level and beat other high level guys, part of it is their age. Like let's look at the Hudalo brothers from Atos, right? I don't even know how old they are, but they're super fucking young.
Like 19,
Yeah,
20?
and like, you've got
Kolabati,
right, who's 15.
Yeah.
So
God,
obviously
what a specimen.
part of it is their age.
Yeah.
So they have a slight advantage depending on the age of their opponent. But, you look at how well they're doing, and let's say they're fighting like a 30-year-old who's by no means over the hill.
Mm-hmm.
But that 17-year-old, 18-year-old, they haven't been on the planet for long enough to have learnt the same number of techniques as that older guy has. Yet how do they still beat them? Okay. And I think it's all, I believe it's built on this deep, like, understanding of certain concepts and principles of certain positions. And then from that deep understanding, it's almost like they don't need that many techniques. It's like understanding the concept alone. Yes, you do still need to learn specific techniques, but it's built on that understanding. So I'll give some examples.
Yeah, please.
So it makes a little bit more sense, right? So let's say probably a really well-known one is when you talk about leg entanglements and leg locks and controlling the knee line is what they talk about. And what they mean is if I'm wanting to heel hook you, I need to have control of your knee. If you free your knee, as in like I start to slide down more towards your shin and I'm not up above your knee, near your thigh and hips, I essentially don't have the heel hook, right? So that doesn't mean all I need to learn is how to control the knee line and I will heel hook people. No, I still need to learn how to do a heel hook, how to dig the heel, and all these other techniques. But I don't need to learn like a million of them. If I have this deep-rooted understanding of controlling the knee line, it's just then operating in that zone is going to grant me more opportunities. Right? Another way I really think about it is here in Australia, like rugby league is a massive sport and I despise it, but I'll use it as an example. Or let's say football is in soccer or whatever. If I can, or any sort of like field or court sport, soccer, football, basketball, whatever, right? Let's imagine if I can just have the game where there's my half of the court that I'm trying to defend and your half of the court, right, where the goal or the net is or whatever. If for the entire game I can keep the ball in your half of the court, like just more opportunities will present themselves for me to score, right? So these like concepts of certain positions are kind of like that, right? So when I speak to you about your pressure passing, and again, I use the term knee line, and I say to you the style of passing that you're trying to develop, I say, Kieren, if you can operate in between your opponent's like hip and knee, so you're in that thigh area, just being able to stay there is kind of like being able to keep the ball in their half of the court or their half of the field.
So they're defending, yeah.
More opportunities will present themselves for you to pass, right? There will be more goal scoring opportunities because the ball is in their half, right? So I think these younger guys are really embracing this because I'm not going to say it's a shortcut. A shortcut implies that they're trying to
less
like
work or something.
Yeah, that's not the case, but it's just more efficient. Yes, they're still learning specific techniques, but it's built off that. And then that deep that ability and understanding of keeping the ball in that half of the court is just presenting them so many more opportunities to pass or sweep or whatever, right? Yeah, again, leg locks. If you can control the knee line and understanding that, more heel hooks are going to become available to you. And then from those multiple opportunities that present themselves, that's when you need to have learnt the specific techniques to apply it and things like that. So obviously we're talking more from a competitive point of view, because we're talking how to beat each and every opponent. So we're talking really more about the competition side of jiu-jitsu. We're not talking about like self-defense techniques and blah, blah, blah. But does that make some sense?
Yeah. So it's understanding concepts, right? We're talking about understanding, basically taking your game, being a specialist in that area, having a very solid understanding, not necessarily of every individual like little hand position, every individual technique, if this, then that scenario, but more understanding broader concepts that you can apply to those scenarios, right?
Yeah, because I think previously, I'm not saying there's no value in teaching or learning techniques in a very methodical step-by-step way, but previously it was kind of only taught like that. It was you needed to know like the exact move and the step-by-steps to those moves to counter whatever your opponent's doing. But I think it's better to kind of move away from that and just kind of understand like, no, like instead of needing to know the exact one and only technique that answers that question, it's better if you just understand that like, well, as long as I can counteract that. I mean, hang on, let me give you another analogy, right? God, I love me some analogies, right? It's the sole reason we lose so many listeners. They're like, fuck this dude.
Yeah, I have a look at the analytics, and the point an analogy starts, the drop-off is insane.
Right. Yeah. Think about it like this, right? I'm not a chef at all, right? But I understand a little bit about cooking, and I think anyone who knows a little bit about taste and cooking or whatever, you know, it's pretty common knowledge that food that tastes good has a balance of like saltiness and sweetness and what's that word? Umami and, you know, bitterness. And there's all these like senses that we taste, right? And it's a balance of that. Like if something's too bitter or something's too sweet, like it doesn't taste good, right? It's that balance. And I remember if anyone like used to watch did it happen on, I think it was on like MasterChef. Remember MasterChef, right? Which I think is still on, right?
Yeah, I don't watch it, but yeah.
But you're familiar.
Yeah, it's a cooking show.
Yeah, they used to have a challenge, or maybe they still do. I haven't watched it for bloody years. But they used to have a challenge where I think it was on MasterChef, God. But anyway, the cooking show. And they had a challenge where they would essentially be given a dish that like tasted bad. Not bad, but was just bad. Like let's say a spaghetti bolognese, or like the sauce for a pasta sauce or something. And it's just nothing. Like it's just this, you know, it's not like it's had rotten eggs put in it, but it just doesn't taste good. And it's like the challenge is to fix that dish. Like take something that's actually already been made and to make it actually into something that tastes really good. Cool. And I think the concept, it's kind of like the difference between me saying, you know, let's say we're trying to fix a dish that doesn't taste well. Instead of me saying to you like, oh man, you need to put like a little bit of put a squeeze of lime in it. It's kind of like me saying, no, you need to add a bit of sourness.
Right.
You know, so understanding like. So
instead of like it needs 5 mils of lime, it needs 2 grams of salt. You would be like, oh, it needs some.
It needs, man, it needs some,
salt.
Or instead of me saying like, man, chuck a squeeze of honey in there. Me saying, man, it needs a bit of sweetness. And like it's missing sweetness.
Do with that what you will that achieves that outcome.
There's multiple ways you could add sweetness.
That makes sense.
So like you could put pineapple on pizza to make it.
Yeah, fuck oath, you can. You can.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just going to derail a little bit, right? Because that just reminded me, I have to read this
quote. Are we not already derailed?
Wait, what are we talking about again? I've got to read this quote. So,
so this is from Oleg, right?
Yeah. So episode 28 was the nutrition episode.
Look at you go. Yep.
And we, ended the episode with me asking, whether you can put what thoughts on pineapple on pizza. And then not out of nowhere, but obviously after listening to the episode with no context or anything, doesn't say like, hey, I just listened to the episode, just sends me this from Oleg, one of our students. He wrote, quote, pineapple on pizza haters are antisocial sheeple that graze on the physical manifestation of their own farts and can't think for themselves. So Oleg is clearly passionate about pineapple on pizza.
Yeah, we've started like I don't think there's been many anti-pineapple on pizza people at the gym since we've started posing that question. And I think they're afraid.
Well,
I think they're afraid to admit it.
It was someone the other day in the gym. It was a white belt a 4-stripe white belt. And I don't know, it came up and he was like, yeah, pineapple on pizza is good. And I'm like, that's the right answer, Josh.
Yeah.
There's someone with 4 stripes on their white belt.
Yeah, 100%.
Correct answer.
Well done to you, sir.
But yeah, that fun, so then I don't need you to memorize every single ingredient possible and which ingredient is applicable to which type of dish, to make it, to add that sweetness, right? You need to know some of those ingredients, but you don't need to know all of them.
Yeah, exactly.
Because some of them, like I could use honey to add sweetness to a dessert as well as a savory food, right? Like
yes.
honey, soy chicken or whatever, like it goes in both, so you don't need to know everything. And I believe previously jiu-jitsu was kind of taught and digested that way. It was a bit more very kind of like, this is the
linear,
move, this,
we'll say.
linear.
Like A, then B, B, then
Right.
C back to A, repeat and things like that. But now what you're saying is if you understand the concepts, you can put all of these scenarios into buckets, right?
Yeah.
You can deal one thing or a group of things deals with a larger amount of techniques rather than understanding if they put their hand here, you must put your hand there.
Yeah, exactly.
So
right?
that makes it a lot more efficient and easier to learn and get really good at.
Yeah, and then you can spend more time drilling fewer techniques. The famous Bruce Lee quote, fear the man who trains
1,000 kicks.
Yeah, 1,000 kicks, fear the man who knows one kick 1,000 times or whatever it is, right? So I really believe that's why these guys are getting so good, because then they've just got these core understandings. And of course, certain positions you can get under that blanket word of concepts and principles, you can still get super complicated, That's not always going to be something as simple as like, oh, leg locks, knee line. It's not always like that, because I could use the same thing about, guard retention. I could talk about, don't let them pass your knee line is another. I use knee line as well when I talk about guard retention. But then there's times they clear your knee line, but you got control of their knee line or their armpit, and so it can get really complicated. But yeah, moving away from this, like you said, A equals B, and then this, like that linear fashion. So then how do you beat each opponent, right? Not each opponent, every opponent, Kieren. How do you beat every opponent?
The question.
The best guys that I've ever trained with and competed against in the world, the thing that they are masters at and better at than the techniques they do themselves is the ability for them to keep the fight where those techniques are possible, right? So let's look at leg lockers, right? Sometimes it's not even the fact that they're absurdly good at leg locks. Of course they are, but it's almost like, well, they're even better at keeping the fight in a leg entanglement. Levi, I used to train a lot with Levi Jones-Leary, known as like one of the best lightweights in the world, although I think he just fought on who's number one at middleweight, actually. So, but anyway.
And won,
yeah. And has one of the best bearing bolos in the world. We trained together from like purple belt. And yeah, his ability to keep the fight in a position where he can do a bolo from is almost what he's better at than the bolo itself. Don't get me wrong, he's like absurdly good at the bearing bolo. But the fact that he can keep the fight somewhere where bearing bolos are possible allows him to also do more bearing bolos, which makes him better at bearing bolos, right? Again, another example would be like GSP from the UFC. Sure, you can go on about whether his fights were boring or not, but the fact that he was able to always, if he wanted the fight on the ground, it was on the ground. If he wanted it standing, it was standing. He kept the fight where it was strongest for him and weakest for his opponent. Okay, so constantly controlling the fight in the position that you want it to be in, man, is one of the biggest bits of advice that can really help you win more matches.
Right. So being a master of control, operating in your area of specialty, or identifying your opponent's area of specialty and operating in the opposite of that, or keeping them out of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you I always say this to people competing in just random generic competitions. You don't know who your opponent is, or for lower belts that, you're not fighting some dude who already has a name. You don't know who you're fighting. So I say don't put any energy into thinking about what they're good at or bad at. You just know where you're good. Keep the fight there. And, if you lose, like they got the better of you, you don't know if, okay, my strength is passing half guard. You don't know. Maybe your opponent's strength is half guard. And then his half guard is better at your passing and you get swept and you lose. I mean,
that's the game.
You didn't know that. But obviously at the professional level where you're maybe doing a super fight, or even if you're not doing a super fight, you're at worlds where, you have generic brackets, a lot of the people you're going to fight, what they're good at, so then you can have a specific game plan, and whether that game plan is, embracing what your opponent's good at because you think you're better at them than them, or is it staying out of it? Lucas Lepre, when he fought Gary Tonin at not the last ADCC, the one before, he beat Gary Tonin, and, he just did not have a bar of Gary Tonin's like leg entanglements, right? Just didn't let that shit happen at all. Opposed to going like, oh yeah, I'll play footsies with Gary Tonin, So keeping the fight where your strengths are, right? Ignoring your opponent's strengths, if just for the average listener and average competitor, man, is going to take you so far, so far.
So just to talk on that piece, as everyone's probably aware, I work on a lot of pressure passing. And when I get paired up with someone that their game is triangles, like a blue belt out of Jim Jonas, for example, it generally ends up being pressure pass into triangle, escape, back to pressure pass, into triangle, escape, back to pressure pass, or like submit along those lines.
Well, how good? Yeah, you got good triangle escapes now, right?
Dude, yes. Nowhere to lie. Like my triangle escapes have come so far. I got caught in Eric's triangle yesterday. I held on to that motherfucker.
I looked over. Did you not come out bleeding?
Yeah, my nose started bleeding. Yeah. I started like bleeding from my nose just of all the pressure.
Worth it.
Yeah, so worth it. Like, cause I was safe though. Like, there was points where it was fucking tight and I was hanging on, but I was safe because I'm been sitting in so many fucking triangles, man. I've been sitting in so many triangles for so long.
I just sort of lost my train of thought. But on that, just to specifically mention what you're working on, like one, you're not going to get better at not getting triangled by just not trying to pressure pass. I remember when I was training with Langy once, and I think we were training no gi. It doesn't matter whether it was gi or no gi, but I kept trying to come up on a single leg. I was playing guard and I kept trying to come up on a single leg as my sweep, and I got guillotined every time. And I remember in this one roll, it was like 6 guillotines in a row. And then after the roll, he was like, he congratulated me in the sense that he was like, that's it, bro. Like you got to keep trying. Like, yeah, we can talk about where your head position should be and stuff, but you could spend 8 years studying the theory. Like you've got to practically do it to build that muscle memory and to the intuition of where you're, those little things that you can't get good at without actually doing it, right? He's like, man, you're not going to all of a sudden like read that magical phrase that you won't get guillotined anymore. Like you have to just, keep coming up on the single leg, and like eventually you're not going to get guillotined. And so it's the same thing with your pressure passing and your over-unders. I don't think there's a person in the world that has decided that they want to get good at pressure passing or over-under passing and hasn't gone through that. I get triangled and omoplated all the time.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anyone that has not gone through that. And some people might choose the route of, man, I don't like this style of passing isn't for me, and they might write it off, which can happen. There's more than that. That's not the only way to pass.
Yeah.
Or there's people who then persist and get to a point where usually the first step is getting really good at escaping triangles, right? But then that develops into you having this really good intuition of when a triangle's coming, and you'll start to not get caught in them.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In your case specifically, we mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that the next thing I'm wanting you to add is you're giving up that control in your armpit, which is turning into a triangle or an omoplata.
Yep.
right? So because you're thinking, oh, I've got either both arms in or both arms out, but you've got one arm with your armpit super exposed, so it turns into an omoplata.
Yeah.
But
So that's the next thing I'm still working on.
yeah. But yeah, that's the case. Like you could go to compete and the guy might have a game identical to Jonas's and you don't know that,
Well,
right?
I did compete against a guy that had a game identical to Jonas's.
And you ended up in a triangle
this is
for
what
a very long time,
It
right?
initiated the whole let's work on this because that's when maybe I was just starting, like day one of looking into pressure passing, and I ended up in a triangle for nearly a minute 30.
Yeah. And, you know, if you have any doubts about that type of passing, man, just go watch the years and years and multiple fights of Bernardo Faria, Andre Galval. Well, they're in recent history, they would be the two biggest names that are well known for their pressure passing. There's a lot. Murillo Santana from Unity.
This
have a look
into
at
body
those.
locks as well. Like
Body
you could even
locks,
look
right?
at Craig Jones is doing body locks are so meta at the moment in no gi. So it's a similar-ish style.
Ish, right? But look at those dudes have got hundreds of fights, and have a look at them and tell me how many times they've been triangled or umnaplatted. Yeah, sometimes, but percentage-wise, like 1% of the time, you know, like it's a very, if you're a odds man, if you're a betting man, you would bet on the pass, on them not getting caught, right? But that didn't happen overnight.
So just to circle back a bit on like how to beat an opponent's game and what techniques to put, you know, stock into. And it was a sort of, this is being triggered by a question that I had yesterday, I believe, but I didn't ask it. How do you know what is high percentage?
Like as in
well, as a you know, new person to jiu-jitsu, as a white belt, I hear these, you know, focus on high percentage. Like this is high percentage.
Right.
This is low percentage. For someone to make an assessment yourself in the moment, if you will, or in general, without having to look up actual statistics in competition, how do you know what is generally considered to be high percentage?
In my opinion, there's only two ways to come to a conclusion of what's high percentage. You've got high percentage techniques that have been proven by multiple competitors in competition, right? So heel hooks, proven to be a high percentage leg lock finish or a high percentage submission, right? Not only do a lot of fights finish in that submission, but it's a submission that once you're in it, not many people escape it, right? So you can define high percentage submissions as something that across the entire jiu-jitsu community, as just, you see it all the time. Again, like you said, if you don't want to go actually looking at statistics, if you just watch a bunch of jiu-jitsu, you'll notice there's like certain submissions that you see
Trends,
more often than others, right? And that changes over time. Also changes from which guy is currently the best in the world and what are they good at. But then you've got a high percentage that's relevant to you. So, and that's going to depend on what you've developed a knack for. Okay. Let's say for me, you know, my arm bars from close guard, for example, an arm guard from when I'm on the bottom is an incredibly low submission. It's low percentage submission for me personally. It's something that I never felt a knack for. I never really developed a really good armbar from the bottom, like my armbar from the top, from like mount or side control, I'm super happy with. But from guard, it's a very low percentage submission for me, right? It's just never resonated with me. Whereas a triangle is an incredibly high percentage submission for me because it's always felt really natural and whatever. So then, you've got what is high percentage for you. Which should you focus on more? That depends how much you care, right? If your sole goal is being the best in the world, I mean, it's a bit silly to ignore what's been proven by other athletes, right? Just go, okay, well, if I want to be the best in the world, everyone is winning fights by heel hooks and das chokes. Man, get good at those, right? If you don't care that much because you don't want to go on to become a world champion, you just enjoy jiu-jitsu, well, work on what's high percentage for you, what you enjoy. We did an episode talking about keeping jiu-jitsu fun and embracing the grind of jiu-jitsu. It's got to be fun, man. You know, like me as someone who's kind of past my active competitive part of my jiu-jitsu career, if all of a sudden it was like, man, arm bars, like 99% of fights are finishing in arm bars, I probably wouldn't invest the time in getting better at them. Like I would, maybe I would. I understand them and I can teach them to you, but I don't enjoy them. I don't enjoy how they feel. They're not great for me, right? I don't like them. So I wouldn't invest even if they're high percentage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. What about if we're talking chokes versus locks?
Oh, that's a no-brainer, bro. Chokes all day.
Yeah.
The argument is, some people are super tough and they'll let you break stuff and they won't tap. Whereas we saw it even as recent as, God, I forget their name. The two girls were fighting at Worlds, I believe, and this girl let her own arm break, right?
Did she win at least?
No, I can't even remember.
Wait,
God,
if your arm's broken,
I feel so embarrassed.
Can't the ref stop the fight?
Dude, I don't know if it's changed recently. But yeah, I don't know. I don't think they stopped the fight, Maybe they do nowadays, but they definitely didn't used to. The most famous example is Hodger versus Jacare, where Hodger was down on points in the finals of Worlds. And so he kind of pretty much needed a submission to win. He got Jacare in an armbar, and there was only like a minute left or something, and Jacare was, up on points. He let Hodger break his arm, and then with a broken arm, he could rip his arm out of the armbar. And then with like 20 seconds to go or something, Jacare just kind of,
stalled.
Yeah, kind of just stalled and just made sure no points were scored on him, and Jacare won.
Fuck that.
Right? And at the end of the fight, the end of the match or whatever, in interviews and stuff, Hodger's like, yeah, I might not have the gold medal, but I won. His freaking arm's broken, right? Whereas chokes,
he's got a point, because if it was like, look, let's look at...
but at the same time, if you look at MMA, like the refs stop the fight when limbs break.
Yeah.
Or,
that's what I'm saying. Like, he's got a point.
So it's quite weird because in jiu-jitsu, the ref will stop the fight if the person passes out from a choke, but they won't stop. Well, at least they didn't back then. I don't know about nowadays. I recently did my rules course, but they don't specify that. And I didn't ask the question, like, do you stop the fight if you see someone's arm or leg break or something?
I think in MMA, a ref can stop the fight if they hear it break. If they see like an arm bending take an arm bar.
Because some people have got super hyper flexible joints.
And I think Herb Dean has spoken about this before. If he would stop the fight, if he could hear like cracking, like the bone cracking and it's breaking at the very right time, like obviously he's widely considered the best referee for MMA in the world, he would stop the fight at that point and he would be well within his rights to do so. Yeah. So the fact that in the world, at Worlds in Jiu-Jitsu, like if that was a white belt, fuck man, and a ref would stop it. You would hope.
You'd think so.
If it's broken, like fuck me, why would you do that?
If it's not in the rules that the ref should stop the fight, in my opinion, it should be because, there's, at the end of the day, people want the sport to be safe, right?
Yeah.
To some degree. And the same way a referee can stop a boxing match, even if the guy hasn't been knocked out and the corner hasn't thrown the towel in, if the ref deems this is unsafe for you, it's no longer safe for your health for you to continue, they call it, right? They call it a technical knockout, right?
But the point in that very specific example, gets his arm broken, 20 seconds left. If he's willing to do that, fuck, that's a tough one.
Nah, man. In my opinion, it should be,
probably should be stopped.
I think it should be stopped.
Yeah.
It's gone to a point where it's no longer safe.
Yeah, you got to call a precedent, right?
Yeah. I mean, the line's got to be drawn somewhere, right? And the line should be any sport that has a referee, you're at the ref's discretion, right? So of course there will always be, he stopped it early, he stopped it late. Okay, but that's the nature of having a referee in sports. Okay, you've put a human element into it,
of course.
But the line should just be simply, if the referee deems that the safety, it's no longer safe for that athlete to continue, the fight should be stopped.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not deemed safe because the other athlete has broken a rule, right? hence like in competitions that don't allow knee reaping, the referee stops it and disqualifies that athlete because it's against the rules because it's deemed not safe in that rule set, right? So how should that be any different for like an arm breaking?
That's a good point.
But I don't know how we got on to talking about that. How did we get on to talking about that? I can't remember.
High percentage. We're talking
high
about
percentage.
High percentage. Then you talk about arm bars. Then you talk about the example of I asked chokes versus locks. And you said that's a prime example. You would want a choke.
So big strong dude, cut off the blood to the brain, boom, passes out. That's what everyone says, right?
Yeah.
So
I prefer chokes. I'm just going to put it out there. I prefer chokes.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, less in my experience, less can go wrong in a choke, I suppose.
And I think there's less. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not a neuroscientist, but it's by no means healthy to cut off blood flow to the brain. But I think it's shown that it's much easier to inflict long-term or short-term damage to limbs, like to joint locks, than it is to if someone passes out.
Yeah, 100%. I have to agree. I have to agree with that.
Yeah. And I think as well, just the nature of how chokes work, people are more likely to tap because they not all the time, but they can often feel themselves passing out. So they tap, right? Whereas not all the time, right? But that happens a lot. Even at a professional level, you see guys who are tough as nails tap to a choke because they know they're about to pass out.
Yeah.
Whereas with like their joints, they don't, with adrenaline, everything, their pain threshold is high. They don't necessarily know where the breaking point is.
And the problem is,
breaks.
If someone's like fighting really hard against it, right? Say, again, we'll just use armbar. You're fighting that armbar super hard and you're not letting your grip go, and then all of a sudden it just
let it
flicks.
go. Yeah, and it's like a slingshot, bro.
Yeah, and boom, your arm's fucking gone.
Yeah.
Your arm's broken. Yeah. Whereas that's going to take a long time to recover from. But with a choke, you could be doing the same thing, fighting, your arm slip, and boom, you're out. It's over. As we said, probably not the healthiest thing to get choked out unconscious every day, but we're not talking about every day. You're going to be able to walk away. You're going to be fine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I have to totally agree. I much prefer to do the choke and to be choked compared to a joint lock every day of the week.
Yeah, for sure. So back to how to beat any and every opponent. Okay. So understanding fundamental concepts and building off those is a buzzword life hack to get really good at jiu-jitsu real quick. Keeping the fight in your area of expertise goes a long way. And I think the last sort of, because there's no magic as clickbaity as you want those videos to be. There's no, use this pass to pass anyone's guard. It's all just bullshit clickbait, right? There's no technique that works all the time. Kids always do this in like kids class. They always think that this one thing should work, or some white belts too, adult white belts. Man, if one technique worked all the time and had no counters, why would you need to learn any other technique?
You talk about that a lot when you're teaching or talking about escapes from a bad position, right? Like oftentimes you get the objection, oh yeah, but this doesn't work for me. It's like, yeah, well, it's fucking hard. Yeah. It's hard to get out of bottom mount, right? So yeah, this may not work. This may only work like fucking 25% of the time, but it's better than, getting subbed. Yeah. You know what I mean? It takes a lot of energy and effort and skill to work out of a bad position with an equal skilled opponent on top of you, equal weight.
So the last sort of generalized tip, right, that will help you beat any opponent is understanding the matchup, okay? And so we could stretch this out to talk about if you're fighting in the absolute division, but we can apply it to also fighting within your same weight division, because within your same weight division, you could be fighting a guy who is the same weight as you, but he's like shorter and stockier and stronger than you. Or you could be fighting someone who's taller than you and longer than you, and they've got big reach and long legs or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the matchup and how you go into that matchup is super important, okay? So if I'm let's put it in an absolute division scenario, just so it kind of, we're looking at the extremes, makes it a little easier to understand. If I'm going against, let's say Sagi, who's someone at our gym who's smaller than you, okay? I'm bigger than him, taller than him, stronger than him, right? However, Sagi's much, much faster than I am, okay? So when I go into that matchup, I am the big, strong guy in that matchup. I am not the small, agile guy in that matchup. So if I went into that fight going, man, I'm going to be real quick and explosive and agile and do this and that, I'm going to lose that matchup, right? Because he is quicker and faster and more agile than I am. Then if I go against, let's say, 110 or 120 kilo black belt.
Andre Galvao.
Yeah. Like in that matchup, I am by default the small agile guy. Even though at heart, I'm not a small agile guy because I'm a, 95, 100 kilo guy, 6'4". I'm not a small agile guy. I am in that matchup because if I go toe to toe trying to be the big, strong, heavy guy, I'm not as big or strong, as heavy as that guy.
So you're going to fight in their domain and lose.
Exactly, right? So I need to understand that in that matchup, I am the agile guy. So it's a very simple example is when you look at striking, when you look at boxing, right? You often have the matchup. Again, they're the same weight division because, again, boxing has weight categories. However, one guy is the short, stocky guy and the other guy's the tall, skinny guy with the reach advantage. You don't have to know a lot about boxing to know what those two opponents' strategies are. The tall guy is going to want to maintain his reach advantage, keep the shorter guy at bay with his jab, right? And the little guy is going to be wanting to get in on the inside.
The pocket.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it's a very simple example, but it's a very, that's what the strategy would be. Whereas, let's say that short, stockier guy, a lot of the time he is the bigger guy. So his strategy is the reach advantage. If then he goes in and tries to fight that tall Stefan Struve, John Jones guy with a massive reach and goes, I'm going to keep him at range with my jab. Dude, by the time your jab hits his face, you're in hook territory for John Jones, or whoever, right? So you have to adapt it to that matchup. So you can make that call then and there. I do it with Eric, right? A lot of even though he's only a white belt, a lot of the sweeps and techniques I like to do are built on the fact that 9 times out of 10, I'm the taller guy than my opponent. Because even in my weight division, I'm what some people would refer to as lanky. So I usually fight shorter, stockier guys.
Some people.
Yeah. I usually fight shorter, stockier guys. So a lot of the techniques I like to do are built on the fact that I have a reach advantage. But when I fight Eric, it's void because he's the same height as me. So I have to take a different approach, right? Because if I have you in my X guard, if I stretch you out, right, that's enough to make you fall. But I stretch Eric out,
he just takes a
he's
little
still
step back.
Yeah, right. So I have to approach that matchup differently, and that's in the beginning. That's hard because when you're a white belt, you don't have necessarily
another game, a backup game, right?
Yeah, I don't even necessarily need to. Maybe not a backup game, but you different things you need to be aware of. Like let's say I like to pressure pass as well. When I'm pressure passing someone Sagi's size, there's different concerns I have and different little things I have to be aware of than when I'm pressure passing someone Eric's size, who's my size, right? There's not less to worry about, but the things that would concern me against Sagi don't concern me when I'm against Eric because they don't come into play because of his size, right? So understanding the matchup is super important. And I say this to all the guys as well who are rolling against someone who is much heavier than them. So let's say if you're rolling with Carl's like a 100-ish or a bit more black belt that trains with us and quite strong guy. Like he's a real someone referred to him as a Viking, right?
Yeah,
like he
looks like one,
that sort of build. Like someone like that, or let's say Joe, Joe's, so maybe more applicable. Joe's a white belt, 4-stripe as well, so more applicable to your level, but ex-rugby player,
stocky,
real big. He's lost a lot of muscle now.
Like very, very large.
Yeah, he's lost a lot of muscle now intentionally, right? Yep. But he was like 110?
Yeah.
Big muscle rugby player, Like you cannot let someone like that settle on you. Like you're faster than him. You may not feel like you're a fast, agile person, but you are compared to Joe. And you just can't let him settle in on you because you won't be able to deal with that weight.
Well, that's right? Actually the selfish sort of question I wanted to go down is when I do roll against Joe, because last night I rolled against Joe, I'll let him settle me. I had a hard time. I had to work my ass off to escape him.
I remember looking over and seeing you in side control on the bottom, and I've been there with Joe.
Yeah,
and I was like,
tough.
oh man.
And I had to literally put all of my energy, create space, and fucking bench press him off, like in a very crude sort of way. I just got lucky that he lost his balance and I could get out and then restart. So for someone like Joe, normally with the bigger guys, I'm aware that I can't normally beat them using my pressure game. Like I play top, I play a bit of a heavy game. With a dude like Joe, it's
hard because not only can he take that weight, but he's also like for his weight, he's quite short. So meaning he's got massive like quads and glutes. So even when you try pressure pass him, it's a very heavy leg to lift, or he can just kind of like tilt his hips and that's enough to affect your base.
Exactly.
Right. So you kind of can't take that approach. You're better off to go for an approach of like, I can do a really quick, like Toriando, like a really quick bullfighter pass because he can't catch me. Right.
Right. So
whereas Joe should be looking at a matchup with you and going like, okay, I need to control Kieren, slow him down, get a hold of him, because otherwise he's just going to run circles around me.
Okay, I need to adjust because with the bigger guys, I've been like, I'll just play guard. And then I think that's...
Well, you can too, but like play guard as in think like, okay, you can play guard,
open
but work
guard.
the angles. Open guard, and then you do a super quick collar drag to his back because he can't catch you, right? I often think about like... when it's a real big, strong guy against a smaller guy, I often think something out of a cartoon. That small guy wants to be like the dude who's on the back of the giant, and the giant's like reaching behind him, trying to grab this like dude who's climbing all over him off his back, right? That's what I think about. And when I used to train with like some really small guys in Brazil who were already like black belt world champions, that's how I felt as a bigger guy. I felt like I was just like, get off of my back, and I couldn't catch them, and I would spin around and they would already be around behind me again.
That's funny.
So
I heard he's a purple belt coach, and he coaches the kids classes at our gym. I was half hour early to yesterday's lesson. I was just doing some mobility, and I overheard something that he was saying to the kids. Like it was a matchup, a bigger kid, an older kid versus a smaller kid. And he said to the smaller kid, he's bigger and stronger than you. You need to match him with energy. You need to...
as he's listening to some of the shit I'm saying?
Yeah. And I that just sunk into my mind. I'm like, that's pretty good. I'm going to take that. Like, so he's encouraging the smaller guy. You can win. You just got to match with energy. You got to beat him with your energy and your speed.
Yeah. And it's no different to sometimes like an entire MMA fighter's strategy for a fight can be outwork him. Once you get to round 5, he'll gas out.
A bigger gas tank.
Yeah, and that entire strategy is built on you have a bigger gas tank.
I've used that before.
Right?
Yeah.
And imagine if the other dude went like so Jeremy Skinner was on here recently, and he was talking about his good episode. Go back, listen to that. He was talking about, we spoke a little bit about his up and coming fight. He has a lot of fights coming up, which I'm excited to watch. But he has one in particular on the up-and-coming Subversion card in February, I believe it's been rescheduled for, against Taliesin Suarez. And, one of the things he said is he's like, man, like Taliesin has got a massive gas tank and incredible cardio, So Jeremy's game plan is not to go in and try to outwork Taliesin, but he's going like, okay, well, I need to prepare to make sure I don't gas out in 2 minutes into the fight.
Yeah, 100%.
But like I need to address that. But my strategy is not to outwork him. It's to, to control him, to negate his gas tank, take that strength away from him.
Yeah.
Right. And okay, that's a bit of a different situation because they're both professional athletes who know each other and know their games. They can form a game plan.
study. Yeah.
But I mean, you can to some degree when you're just training in the gym or training at an open mat or doing a competition where you know nothing about your opponent, you can make to some degree judge the book by their cover. I mean, it's not going to be like 100% guaranteed, but
it's a best guess, right?
I mean, it's an educated guess, right?
Part of the game, yeah.
Yeah, you know, you don't know who you're fighting. You know, so people would often always look at me with long legs and go, he's got long legs, he's probably a guard player. I don't want to be in his guard. I'm not going to let him pull. I'm going to pull guard first, right? Which, you know, you can't necessarily fault them for that decision. I mean, it's kind of changed. The jiu-jitsu has evolved a lot where, I mean, in my opinion, the best guard players have short legs, right? But previously that wasn't the case.
Would you consider yourself a guard player?
Dude, I mean, I'm just a player in general. No, I can't believe I said that. Me sitting here, had one girlfriend my whole life.
I was about to say, is your wife listening to this?
Yeah.
Probably not.
I don't know.
Top.
Well, I pulled guard at the last Subversion. Right?
True, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Bit of everything. I don't know. I bounce between them, bro.
Makes sense.
I don't know. What if my future opponents are listening to this? I don't want to
They should be in prepreparation for your super fight. They've listened to like 40 episodes of the podcast and like taking notes.
Finally,
and shit.
Yeah,
man, they deserve it. If they've listened to 40 hours of podcasting, they deserve to get an advantage. But that makes sense.
But yeah, I think you can make to some degree an educated guess, you know, when you're matched up against your opponent, right? So, you know, I think those three things will take you a long way into you becoming really competitive against any opponent, right? You know, build your techniques off deep understanding of the concepts of the position that you're working in. And of course, that can get very complicated and there's more than one position. That's why we love jiu-jitsu, but it's definitely a quicker way to learn and a more efficient way to learn than literally learning every single possible combination and this and that. Keep the fight in the area that you're strong, all right? Easier said than done, but yeah, I spoke about, you know, Levi always keeping it in a position where he can bolo from, right? And then understanding the matchup. And you might, you know, in that matchup, even though you weigh $150, right? In that particular matchup, you might by default be the big, strong guy because you're fighting a dude who's a weight division below you or who's smaller than you, but your weight, but you're in that matchup, you're big and strong. Those three things, man, be beating everyone, right? And practice, man. Yeah. Oh, wait, no, I forgot one more. Assay in Jesus.
Yeah, assay in Jesus. Anabolics. We had a bit of a stare off there, but yeah, definitely. I like your example of using like your attributes and weighing up like
that as well, man. Sorry to interrupt, Kieren. Like, yeah, but I hate when we've spoken about this before and people are like, instead of saying your jiu-jitsu is good, man, you're so strong.
Yeah.
Man, your legs are so long. Yeah, they are, but you know,
better.
With jiu-jitsu, like
I got that.
People who criticize you for being strong. I mean, okay, I get where it comes from because sometimes, you know, there is a stereotype of the strong dude being a spaz.
Yeah, but they're trying to tell you you're being a spaz, not that you're being strong. Yeah. They're just picking their words to not like, you know, offend you or whatever.
But yeah, it's like, you know, one of my old training partners as well, Ari, who's got an incredibly good guard, but and he's also incredibly flexible, but it's not like he's difficult to pass, not because he's flexible. It's because he, you know, uses his flexibility in combination with his jiu-jitsu. Incredible knowledge of jiu-jitsu
100%.
To have a very difficult guard to pass, right?
Yeah.
Like flexibility alone isn't going to do it.
It's like strength alone's not going to do it.
Yeah, strength alone's not. I mean, I think in the beginning strength gets a bad rap because when you're starting from zero, it's like a very strong attribute, right?
Yeah.
Whereas without jiu-jitsu knowledge, flexibility alone doesn't really necessarily take you very far, whereas strength can carry you really far on its own.
It makes sense.
But yeah, so I guess that's why in the beginning it gets a bad rap. But
we had a brand new guy yesterday that I was rolling with. We're doing specific training back, we started with hooks in, seatbelt. And first lesson, you know, didn't really know what else to do. He just defaulted to strength. He just grabbed on and squeezed and held
just
on for
wouldn't let
fucking
go,
dear life.
right? Yeah.
Dear life. Like I was all
So
but
it-
escaped. But
Whereas if
was
he
like,
was full splits flexible, like, I mean, it's not, what's it helping him in
yeah,
that?
exactly.
Yeah.
Where would it ever help?
Yeah,
Like,
but obviously when you get to a higher level, man, you're kidding me if you don't, Mikey Musameshi, tiny dude, you're kidding me if you think Mikey's weak. He
Yeah.
would be strong as hell.
proportional. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
100%.
So,
Use your attributes. If you have a
so
bigger
when I
gas
roll
tank,
with Mikey, I might not turn to him and say, man, you're strong. But when someone his weight, who's not a professional athlete, rolls with Mikey, or even someone above Mikey's weight who's not a professional athlete, I guarantee you they'll be like, this kid is strong, bro.
I think the reason, I mean, we've sort of griped about it before, but I think the reason in some people's minds is why they like finish a roll with me, but you're too strong or you're just so strong. It's a way to justify the gap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no matter what I do, even if I'm like a blue belt and you're a white belt, you're gonna win because you're stronger than me.
Yeah.
I just don't buy it.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I totally don't buy it. And I mean, that's been proven by guys that, you know, pound for pound, I'm way stronger than, but obviously they have years on me and they tow me up.
Yeah.
Anyway.
All right, guys. So concepts, keep the fight in your area of expertise and understand your matchup. You now have the ticket to beat any and every opponent.
Thanks for listening.
Money back guarantee.